So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Happy Mardi Gras for those that celebrate. My name is Sam Cooling. I'm a librarian here at the State Library. I work in the reading rooms. I also work in acquisitions and some curation and some research. I'm a giant queer history nerd. My friends can't get me to shut up about it, so it works well that I'm hosting this evening. Please can I remind everyone to pop your mobiles on silent or switch them off if you know how to do that. I don't think I know how to turn my phone off, to be fair. This event will be in just two main discussion sections. So we'll have this first half an hour, we'll be discussing our queer spaces, our present, our past. And then the second part will be discussing our present and our future, imagining those spaces. This is really weird, tickling me in the face. We'll have a performance by Jamaica, Moana in the middle. We've got so many people on this panel. We've got so many diverse perspectives and backgrounds and opinions. So we won't be having a Q&A at the end. We've got so much we can talk about. But we have the collection display outside that many of you may have already had a look on your way in. Really encourage everyone to have a look if they'd like afterwards, have a chat with the curators out there. It'll be really great there. So I wanted to start this with a little bit of an intro myself, a little story. Before I started working here, I did have to do some research, but I was always very hesitant in walking into the State Library. I look at the front and it's colonial sandstone, it's prestige, it's fancy, it's got security guards. And I don't think I'm special enough for that. I looked at myself and think, well, I'm this blue-haired alternative trans queerdo. This is really maybe not the target audience. And then I started working here 3 years ago, literally in the middle of World Pride, like the day after the parade. I'm aware that was a questionable decision. But there were rainbows everywhere. There was a rainbow on the lift to my office. Everyone had lapels and lanyards, and there was a huge exhibition all about queer history in our collections. And I realized that, I can take up space here. I needed that invitation myself, but I didn't actually need that. Being a queer in a queer space was maybe just wherever a queer was in a space. And it became a little bit of my mission to communicate that to my community. So many times we have so much collections here, and I've mentioned to someone that, this amazing story or this community artwork or something, and I say, well, where would you store that? You could, the library's an option. They're like, no, I'm not special enough to be in the library. Like, this right tonight, this is a queer space. The library has hosted Maeve's Queer Stories over in the Mitchell Reading Room as part of World Pride. Everywhere we are, a concentration of queers. We are a queer space. We have our origins in Sydney's public buildings, not in Sydney Town Hall, in Paddington, in Glebe, in Balmain, long before we had established venues, long before homosexuality was decriminalised. We had spaces to be. We would take up spaces for our meetings, for our parties, for our covert. Oh, isn't that just lovely? It's just women in the Balmain Town Hall. Oh, how surprising. Oh, isn't that really, really, really quaint? Yes, yes. We have our overt and our hidden spaces, either because of necessity or from function. We have beats and we have saunas and backrooms and public toilets. We have public spaces in our parks. We have spaces that we've occupied in the past and we still occupy. We have spaces that have lost to us and that we've reclaimed. Beyond bricks and mortar, we have ephemeral spaces written across everywhere in Sydney. We have places that host our events, that come back around to it. We host in the streets, we have our protests and our rallies, our parties, our celebrations, our memorials. And queer people live all across Sydney, not just in our inner city bubble. Remembering that everywhere has our rainbows, if you subscribe, not rainbows if you don't, written all over there. So tonight, I ask everyone here, we're giving ourselves permission to take up this space and create it as a queer space in this discussion. We're here to gather, to share our stories, experiences, our thoughts on queer spaces as individuals and also as community, what that's meant in the past and what that can mean in the future. And discussing the ways that queer spaces exist as more than just places to gather, how they can be our living archives, preserve our stories and our struggles and our triumphs and our lives and our loves. And we reflect and will honour on our lost spaces and how much things are ever really lost if we're talking about them, if we've got them in our memories, in our photographs, in our archives. You'll see a slideshow going through the event. There's lots of images there from our, greatly from our panellists, from their different events, from their different spaces, as well as some interspersed from the library's collection, past venues, current venues, some old things that I dug up of the Sly Fox or some other strange places. And then, so we don't need to hear much more from me. Without further ado, I would like to say how lucky we are to have some incredible speakers tonight, across different generations, locations, events and perspectives, creatives, community leaders, business people, artists, writers. So I shall introduce our speakers here. I will, unfortunately, my order of the bios is slightly different from the way I set them, which was my bad. Maeve Marsden is a writer, theatre maker, and the creative director of Varuna, the National Writers' House and Blue Mountains Writers' Festival. She's best known for producing Queer Stories, a national storytelling project that has brought more than 500 LGBTQIA+ writers to stages around the country for the last 10 years. Welcome, Maeve.
Thanks.
Graeme Aitken is the buyer and manager of Sydney's specialist LGBTQIA+ bookshop, The Bookshop, in Darlinghurst, for more than 3 decades, and prior to that worked at the bookshop in Newtown. He's the author of the novels 50 Ways of Saying Fabulous. I read that and thought, oh, I want to read that. That sounds great. Vanity Fierce and The Indignities. He also edited the anthology, The Penguin Book of Gay Australian Writing. Welcome, Graeme. Thank you. And last but certainly not least in my order here is Joy Ng. Joy is a queer Taiwanese Australian who immigrated from Taipei to Adelaide before moving to Sydney in 2002, armed with a visual arts degree. In 2014, Joy co-founded The Bearded Tit and becoming sole owner 2 years later. For 11 years, the venue served as a vital hub for queer creatives, fostering an intergenerational and diverse community of performers, locals and artists. The Bearded Tit became known not just as a bar, but as a cultural home when connection and creativity flourished. Joy's advocacy extends beyond her venue. She served on the City of Sydney's Nightlife and Creative Sector Advisory Panel for 4 years, working to invigorate the city after dark. She remains a passionate advocate for the artistic and cultural life of Sydney, champions spaces where diverse communities can thrive. Thanks for joining us, Joy.
Thank you.
So I wanted to kick off this part talking about our present spaces, the history, the legacy of spaces, with a bit of an intro question of what to all of our panellists on what is the first word, sentence, concept that comes to mind when you hear the term queer space. What does a queer space mean to you? Graeme, would you like to start?
Yes, I think it's a safe space where you feel free to be yourself, but also where you have some sense of affirmation.
Yeah, beautiful.
I feel, when I hear queer spaces, I instantly think that, okay, it's inherently a political space and it's subversive. That's why I associate with the word queer space.
That's beautiful. And I think as well, everything you said and the incredible list you gave at the start of all the spaces we've claimed, I think a queer space has to be driven by queer people. I don't think that merely a gathering, this can be because, so many of you were involved in programming tonight, but I think that there has to be a kind of driver of queer leadership or queer community building behind the creation of a queer space, adding to what you both said.
I love that. Yes. Queer, political, yeah, yes. And then so building from that, I suppose, what does having dedicated queer spaces mean for our community? With our connections with ourselves, with each other, how does having spaces that we can go, what does that bring that connection in other ways or individuals doesn't?
I think it helps us build community. I think whether it is online spaces or physical spaces, a bookshop or a bar or a cafe, to be able to find, I guess, your people, that is how we're able to start building our chosen family.
I think, yeah, especially like the notion of a dedicated queer space, something that's promoted and known, is crucial for people who've just come out. Like once you're out, once you're in community, great, you can have a house party. But I mean, I went to Fair Day on the weekend and I was like, oh, it's not really for me anymore. I don't need all these stalls, but I'm so glad it exists for somebody who's just come out and needs to find their sports club or needs to find, you know, an organisation to join. And I think that's what bars or spaces or venues or community organisations offer, is that a person who has never met another queer person can turn up and know that they will.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also, I think as a bookseller, I would say that in the 80s and 90s, books were very, very important for people when they were coming out. And often that would be the way that people might first start to examine their sexuality, perhaps by reading a novel. That was certainly what I did, and I know a lot of my contemporaries also did that. So, yeah, I guess the queer space was actually in literature, not so much a physical space.
Well, I mean, and that, I suppose that the concept of a book being a queer space or an avenue to that also then, that brings me to a thought that concept of the difference of impact for community between static spaces and more ephemeral spaces. I mean, and I suppose in that way the bookshop kind of filled both of that, you know, having people connect over a text or over and into a space that, you know, psychologically they felt safe. But what are the differences, or how do we see the different spaces of, say, like businesses and bars and these static like the bookshop, like the Bearded Tit, compared with a space is more like that Maeve curates in Queer Stories, in the way that it, you know, it goes through the actual physical space it's held in isn't as important as the collective kind of metaphorical space that's held.
I think the physical space is important, though.
Yeah.
I think, I think that even our ephemeral queer spaces, it really matters where we're putting them. It matters whether that space is already welcoming, whether it's a dedicated space that we can claim ownership of for a night. It matters if it's instead a space that hasn't been historically for us. Are we in a library? Are we in a major institution? Are we in a government building? Is that bar night, was it called Fag Tag, the bar night that used to go into different pubs and turn it into a queer bar for the night? And I think there's something in that. There's something in choosing venues that we're either going to claim or reclaim or take over and subvert in some ways, where the building matters. It's an empty building, to me, for Queer Stories, was not an appeal. It was like, what's this physical space going to offer this project and this community? And some spaces, once I'd been running the event for a while, I would say no, because I was like, you're not going to give me a dedicated foyer, or you're not going to give me a bar, or you're not going to give me a space for people to socialise afterwards. And I'd be like, that's not the right space for this. Sorry, I interrupted you, but the physical space definitely matters.
Yeah.
But you had buildings, you had physical spaces. That's a physical space. So you talk to that.
Well, I just think having a variety of spaces is important, because we're all so different. Like, just before we came out, we were in the green room and I was talking about how I'm an introvert. And so it's very funny. And I actually am.
The least likely bar owner.
And how we all kind of feel comfortable in different types of spaces. So just having clubs is not enough. Just having a bookshop is not enough. Like, we need to have options because we are everywhere.
Something that's quite interesting in terms of an ephemeral space was the ESOP Queer Library promotion that went on for a few years. And I think everyone would probably know ESOP, the skincare company. And they did this really amazing thing, and it wasn't just in Sydney and Melbourne, it was all around the world, where they went to a bookshop and they just ordered a ton of, like, queer books. It was so much, it was like the equivalent of our takings for an entire month. And, you know, they were ordering 80 copies of a book or 100 copies of a book. And that would be like for a poetry book, for example, that might be 25% of the print run that they were taking. And they weren't just supporting queer bookshops, they were supporting the publishers, they were supporting the authors, and then they were giving something away to the community as well, because they didn't have to pay for it, they were given a free book. And that went on for 3 years in Sydney. And then L'Oreal bought Aesop, and it seems to be kind of fading away or not being quite what it used to be. And definitely it's not happening this year for Mardi Gras. Yeah.
That is disappointing.
But this is the perfect kind of reference to what we were also discussing backstage, which is queer spaces that have to fit within capitalism versus queer spaces that don't. Like when we talk about beats or community gatherings or things like that, lovely, not subjected to L'Oreal buying out the company.
Although that would be really amusing to have a beat sponsored by L'Oreal.
Oh my God, a beat sponsored by L'Oreal. And on the way in, you're just like... Oh, I'm obsessed with trying to make this happen now. I'm abandoning all other pursuits. No, but that some of our spaces, especially anything bricks and mortar, rely on like a financial structure that is capitalist rather than community driven, whereas some of our spaces are able to kind of grow up and be at least somewhat outside of that. And there's quite a difference in how the two have to operate and how sustainable they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, in that context, what is lost when our physical spaces, the places we think of in the moments as ours, these dedicated venues or places that we, even in a short period of time, come to know as a place we can go to, what's lost when these spaces close their doors? Is that a correct way to phrase that? What happens in that space?
Well, I think there's a lot that's lost. Especially speaking from the perspective of the bookshop Darlinghurst, it wasn't only about selling books. It was really like a place of socialisation for many people, and especially some of the older customers who always bought books, who always came to the bookshop, and that was kind of their social outing. It might be their social outing for the entire week to come to the bookshop and talk to my colleague Noel, who was very good with all of the customers.
I bought multiple books because of Noel.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel a little concerned about those customers and how they're faring without the bookshop space. And yeah, when we were sort of in the last months, one of my colleagues told me about an interesting interaction he had with a married, closeted man from Wollongong who used to come to the shop regularly, and it really meant a lot to him to be in that space and to see all the books, and it was kind of his sort of little oasis away from his married life, and yeah, I think it was emotional for him and the staff member that it was closing down.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think third spaces are important because that's where, like, when we lose them, I guess, people feel like there is a loss, and people can have very, very big feelings around that. People are chuckling. And so, yeah, and I feel like there is definitely, in one way, it is a loss of the physical space. It's maybe, for the tits, somewhere people would go after work for a drink by themselves. I have neighbours that have been coming the whole time that we've been open. But then, like you were saying backstage, is it lost or has it just turned into something else, Has it morphed into, like, whether it's in our memories or the communities that are created from those spaces, they're just reshaped into a new thing. What that thing is, I'm not sure. But maybe not seeing it as a loss, even though a part of it is, but it can still live on in other ways.
And what's going to open up in terms of opportunity, or someone learning from the legacy of either of your businesses and kind of going, oh, you can do things that way. Maybe my sort of fledgling idea for a bookshop or a community space or a theatre or a bar has legs. Maybe I could try that. And I think what we were talking about, sorry to keep referring to backstage, but we had a great chat backstage. You should have been there.
I maybe should have saved some
But
questions.
we were talking about how lost has this kind of negative connotation. And the queer community, we love our nostalgia. We love, like, talking about it. But, like, did the Sly Fox need to continue? Or is it really fun being nostalgic about it now. And that actually, like at the end of a relationship, it's not, if it ends after 10 years or 40 years, you still got a huge amount of like value and connection and growth from that. And I think on some level we have to be able to let things pass, have value, and not always see it as an immense loss, and sometimes go, well, actually, the person who ran that beautiful bar is into their next life stage now, and they're going to do something else with their life, and that's cool. And I think we can allow nostalgia to be beautiful, not always driven by grief or anger.
Absolutely.
And some things just run their course.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, with relationships even, whether it's friendships or whatever, like some things, they just naturally have an ending. Not everything can just go on endlessly forever.
And Joy, is it fair to say that kind of those concepts would have had some feedback? You ran an actual funeral for the Bitter Tip.
Yes, I did.
Was this related to these kind of things? You know, like how that gave closure or how that signalled an end? Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to have that kind of event and what you think it gave to the community in that space?
So I really wanted a funeral for the Tit, but I didn't at that time have the capacity to do it. And luckily, Life Rights, Vic Spence stepped in and said, I actually would really like to do a funeral for the Tit. I've been thinking about it and I was actually going to reach out to you. And so it was very much for the community to, I guess, to process it together. Because outside of that, all our programming was very much based on partying. So it was just another way, like we had a choir, we had eulogise, which was really beautiful. So it was a way, it was for the community.
Absolutely. And then I suppose maybe the last kind of, where this brings my mind to, maybe one of the last kind of things to ask before we move on to our performance and our second stage into our futures. Thinking about what is lost or what is not and how things have changed. I was wondering, Graeme, can you tell us a little about, you were on Oxford Street working there for 35 years. You would have seen a lot of change happen, both in the ways that the nature of the spaces, the demographic, the use of them. Can you speak a little bit to your experiences in that or your impressions?
Yeah, I was sort of there from the
Speaking of.
early 90s. And yeah, it was definitely way more vibrant on Oxford Street in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think part of that was economic reasons, that it was just a lot easier to open and run a business back then. And there wasn't the same sort of governance and responsibilities and things that you had to do. And I also remember when the GST came in, that some businesses just decided they didn't want to deal with that and deal with the admin, and they closed their businesses down. But I think it's got an even bigger and bigger. You know, there's a lot of government regulation at all levels, whether it's just state, federal, or local government. But then I think also things used to be a lot more separatist back then. And it was kind of, and it was more sort of gay men and lesbians didn't necessarily want to be lumped in altogether. And that certainly was the case with book publishing, like an anthology like yours, Maeve. You know, they didn't do them back then. They kind of did them separately because the wisdom was that gay men wanted to read about gay men and lesbians wanted to read about lesbians. And then I think that also there were a lot more niche spaces back then as well. So like you had the taxi club for trans women. You had the midnight shift downstairs for Asian gay men. You had Ruby Reds for lesbians. You had the leather bar in the T2 building at Taylor Square. It was the barracks, then it was the Manacle. So there was a lot of more kind of niche bars, I think, back then, and that's kind of faded. And then something else that's completely disappeared was the sex workers, because there used to be sex workers at the Wall on Darlinghurst Road, and then trans sex workers on William Street. And they've just gone online, I guess.
And that's really that change in the venues, the shift in sex work locations and avenues that change the demographic, the activity, the way people move on the street and around and use the spaces?
Well, I also think back then it was a lot cheaper to live around that area, way cheaper, and it's not today. No. And so the younger generation aren't living around there, and so it's a different demographic.
And I think what you say about online, like so many of the niches are moving online and organising events and promoting events online, and those subcultures still exist, but there isn't the same need perhaps for an individual building for each one. And I always think it's beautiful when you get all of the queer community and intergenerational kind of mess of us into a room. That's always what I wanted for Queer Stories, and it's why always I would program across the community. And anytime someone tried to get me to do an event that was just for one identity or one pocket of the community, I was like, that's not the point. The point is to put us all in together and have it be messy and disagree and have different perspectives within the one community. Yeah.
Funnily enough, that's exactly the way I felt when we held Queer Stories here in 2023. That is exactly my thought. And that was one of my hopes for this evening. There's very few places, very few opportunities that we get to collect across our generations, across our life stages, and be in the same space, share our stories, share our past and our futures, because we all tend to occupy different select bars or different kind of activities that we're wanting to do. So I think it's really the value of spaces that can capture a snapshot across all of us is incredible. Yeah. Well, on that top, I think now's probably a good time to move on, have our performance by Jamaica Moana. I'm not quite sure if I'm supposed to just stop talking or introduce Jamaica. Jamaica. Yeah. Woo!
Yeah. Kia ora, is that Jamaica the faggot? Thinks her bars are really hidden while the look is dramatic. Thinks she looks like Jasmine, but she's given Aladdin. Thinks she's really gonna make it like she's got all the patterns. Oh, we're lucky I can comment, so she's wasting her effort. And well, hopefully she's crying anytime that I check her. If I had industry power, let her in, I won't let her. If the whole scene's straight white, boring, it's better. I mean, we got similar struggles from the West, but it's different. But I can't see any further, I'm focused on her image. I don't see her with the fam cooking up all the dinners. I don't see her having issues like some rental decisions, and to be honest, put that fuffer in prison, get that puff locked up like a conjugal visit. I could eat her right now, save the grease from the chicken. From my wrist she threw it back, she's just so finger licking. And did I say she? Bitch, I meant he and him. Can you see that flat chest? Can you see the chin? Oh, he's not fooling me, we never needed him. Who ate the apple from the garden must have been Adam. And since I walked in, so disgusted. Little piece of shit faggot, should've punched that bitch. Fuck that hustle and flow, I would've whooped that trick. I would've wrote her like a spot and fucking cooked that bitch. And yeah, down in lowercase letters. If I tell her she's a flop, then I always feel better. She's the type to rock up in a skank little getup. How the fuck she taking hate while she's keeping her head up? How the fuck she making moves while we're trying to get rid of? Cause she's really fucking different, not the facts of the printer. Think you'll make it in Australia, you scat little critter? Never make her think it's sweet while your life is so bitter. JM, more like fucking Satan. More like you're the demon everybody keeps on hating. Spreading faggotry upon the world, you're just a faking. You will never do it, you will never fucking make it. You stay out in Liverpool, that is why you're ridiculed. You think that a dud from Campbelltown will make an interview? You think that a papa good a bitch won't be a criminal? You think that a hoary from the west will reach the pinnacle? You think that you'd make an underground thing visible? You think that you'd really make it out becoming critical? You think that you'd really sell your singles with residuals? You think that you'd really open doors for individuals? You think people listen to? People really into you? You're not an addition to, the industry is sick of you. You ain't nothing pivotal, all you do is minimal. You are such a waste of fucking space, you fucking animal. Waste of fucking space, waste of being Maori. Bet you have no family supporting, loving proudly. You are not Moana, bitch, you look like fucking Maui. You are not designer, bitch, you look like fucking Audi. I flip a script, got my funnel right in front of me. My ancestors on my back and now they run with me. The Hokianga and my kato, that's what's under me. When I activate it, I know who I'm gonna be. Unless you're paying bills, raising nephews, trying to reach me to send a check to. I never gave a fuck what people say, I keep it real. I used to be a picker-packer, now I'm sealing deals. Have no capacity to care about that. Focus on home, case the lights turn black. I got my jack on black. I'm manifesting, going back in black. Shout out my brothers, my Buddha, my Danny. And all the mochas, they are keeping me steady. And all the ones that I have lost thinking heavy. Now I'm sharp and I'm ready. I'm grateful for the life that I live. I'm conquering any block in the biz. I'm doing well and kind of laughing a bit. Haha. Thank you very much.
Oh, amazing. That was incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, everyone.
I now remember what I was supposed to do as part of the introduction and say, sorry, there's some strong language in the song.
A little bit.
They told me to say that, and I really forgot that, plus the bio. So I apologise, and I will do that retrospectively. I got just too excited. Jamaica Moana is a cultural powerhouse. A rapper, songwriter, creative director, and ballroom icon, she's shifting the landscape of music, fashion, and performance with unapologetic energy and razor-sharp vision, which we have just witnessed. Proudly Maori, Ngāpuhi, Tainui, and Samoan, and repping Western Sydney, Darawal land, Jamaica fuses rap, R&B, and soul with ancestral fire and fierce queer identity. Her sound hits hard, and her presence hits harder. In the ballroom scene, Jamaica isn't just part of the movement, she leads it. As co-founder of the West Ball and as a resident commentator, she commands the floor and carves out space for queer, trans, and BIPOC creatives to express, heal, and to own their power. She's building stages where community shines and the next generation rises. In fashion, Jamaica is a walking statement. She's walked for avant-garde visionaries Nicole and Ford and Jordan Gogos, not just as a model, but as a muse. Her visual world is electric, bold, spiritual, gender fluid, and unbothered by convention. She doesn't follow trends, she sets them. Jamaica Moana is more than an artist. She's a movement, untouchable, unstoppable, unforgettable. That's a bio.
God, thank you so much. I received that, thank you.
So Jamaica's going to be joining us, obviously, for the second half of this conversation here as we move into our present and imagining our futures. The futures of queer spaces. And I do want to start with you, Jamaica, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank
so
you.
You're the creator of co-creator of West Ball,
Yes.
a queer space where the actual physical hosting space isn't necessarily as critical to the event as importance of the queer people place for them to be together, for us to be embodied and expressive, bodies taking up space. More of, I suppose, I think it could think of it more of the queer space formed by that physical collective. Can you share some thoughts on, like, what motivated you to create this space in the first place? Why? What need was there? Why did you found this?
Yes, firstly, I had the blessing to not found this on my own. It was with my business partner, Xander, my community partner, and we are just two individuals, very simply, from Liverpool and Campbelltown, that had no space to walk in like this. And we just wanted to create that space. We realized that we didn't see the change. We only could see the change after the M5, you know, when we went to Marrickville, you know. It was like, yeah, babe, you can wear the wig now. But it's like, what if I actually want to wear the wig before I have to travel to the city, you know? Yeah, it is a funny thing, but I actually put a lot of seriousness to this because we realized that we wanted to make the space for one night in 2019 for West Ball 1, but then it became a pivotal part of the Western Sydney calendar. We are the only nightlife event in Western Sydney, and now for queer people of colour, for trans people of colour, and the space doesn't rely on any venue. It is just a trailblazing force. We just try and reclaim spaces that tell us that we're not there, you know, that we're not supposed to be seen. And now we are entering our 7th West Ball this year. So yeah, we're very, very grateful. Yeah, this is something me and Xander talk about a lot, is that, yeah, we are very humbled by getting messages from community members that the West Ball literally have saved their life, you know, because having a ball in the same block as where they grew up in has saved them, you know. So yes, it's very cool when you hear the ra-cha-cha and we're voguing down, but outside of these spaces, a lot of our kids don't have a lot of place to be, so we just be that, you know. I'm auntie to a lot of these kids who don't have an auntie, you know, or who don't have a mother figure in their life that loves them, because we don't really fit that societal norm, you know. But what is that? You know, that's what we're trying to do. So while we're figuring that out, because spaces are different and different accessible needs for all of us. A lot of us don't come from a lot of money. We know that we just have each other. So whether you're on the street, you're sitting on a gutter, or you're sitting in the State Library of New South Wales, you must feel whole within each other, you know? That's what we do, yeah. Sorry, I'm a rambler. I just go on and on and on. But yeah, shout out to Xander. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you so much. I suppose then, building from part of our conversation in the first part on that concept of creating a space without it necessarily, like it can be tied to the reclamation of a space. But I want to ask, and the questions I ask here don't actually have answers necessarily. This is more just posing those questions, raising that to community in the panel here, but amongst ourselves that we can take further into our lives. You know, what is it important to still have physical static spaces going into the future, or is the way that things are going in terms of, you know, like housing insecurities and crisis and, you know, post-capitalistic bog of eternal stench, is maybe the future more ephemeral spaces, more of these hosting venues, more of reclaiming? Like, I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking you guys, do you think it's important that there's still physical spaces that are just for queers, or?
We need all of them.
Yeah.
All of it, both, and yes, and many. Yeah. But, sorry.
No, I was just going to say both.
Yeah, both. But I think we need to kind of understand what each of those models requires of the community. And I think if we want physical spaces to exist, we need to go beyond asking people to open them and actually start to politically challenge some of the structures that make it so hard. And we need to then support the people who open them, not just with Like, I was joking backstage that I was going to say part of what makes putting on events and spaces for queer people hard is queer people, but but everyone was like, don't do that, they'll come for you. But I think sometimes as a community we expect people who go out on a limb and open projects to be above capitalist structures and above those pressures and to be all things for all people. And actually, if we want our spaces and our events to continue, like I think Jamaica, what you do with Westball in terms of it being a whole of community kind of project, doesn't mean it's not heaps of work for you and Xander, but that's what we have to do. We have to have a community-minded approach to how we support those spaces and support those projects if we want them to continue and sustain. Don't come for me.
But it's true though, like with physical spaces, as much as you love them, you actually have to go into the space, you know, and I find that hard because I'm a home person, like I don't go anywhere, but that is how you support physical spaces, and different spaces need different things, require different things from community. So there is no kind of one template of what is needed for all of that to exist and be successful.
Yeah, turning up and supporting. And I mean, you talk about the future as being a need for queer spaces, but also queering mainstream spaces, which is already underway, but taking those community principles and taking those kind of principles of how we care for artists and how we care for staff and doing things politically. What were some of the things you both said at the start, that these things should be political? We can take that into mainstream spaces and teach other people how to do these things better. And I think that's really exciting too.
And I think the thing to remember with static spaces is because it's been there for decades, don't necessarily assume that it's going to be there forever, because if it's losing money or it's physically or emotionally exhausting for the owner, then it's not going to endure. So you do need to support the spaces that we do have now.
And so, no, please. No.
It's your turn. That's not my turn.
Well, I was going to change the topic, so
No, you
like,
can do that.
well, so I mean, my topic was then going to. I mean, and maybe this is a little bit of a hard question. Maybe it's out of the box. But what are the things that we need to be putting our effort into here? What are the things that we feel like we don't have enough of, or the elements of spaces, or we talked a little about that. Like backstage again about that sustainability of things being hinged on one person or a capitalist structure. Are there some things we feel like we can? Sorry, this thing's annoying me. That we can, maybe we've done that. Maybe we don't need so much of one element, or there's some things that we're like we actually need to be paying attention to a certain part of your events, or things that you think that was really a driving force that could continue to be covered. Or
I wish there was more queer spaces during the day. I come from queer nightlife, so why would I want that? I'm a day person, and to me, having third spaces which don't necessarily revolve around alcohol, places where people can gather, there's not a lot of that, I think, in Sydney, like dedicated queer spaces like that. And there are a lot of nightclubs, bars. They can be more, I guess, but I think Sydney could really do with more spaces for people to gather during the day, everyday spaces, not just event spaces. And cheaper real estate.
Yeah.
So that can happen.
Within my power.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something for libraries, because the libraries do have incredibly comprehensive queer collections, and the State Library must be just phenomenal because they have every book that's published in Australia. But perhaps people don't really know how to access the books here. They see it as a reference library, but you can borrow the books, can't you, from your local library?
We are a reference library, non-lending, and we do hold books, but we also hold much more. This was actually going to be my next question, but I can lead into this.
Okay.
So we do have a large amount of collection, not just in published books, but we have original materials, manuscripts and photographs and pictures, and we're currently working on with Joy on acquiring the Bearded Tits archive. Their ephemera, their menus. Photographs, artworks, letters, videos. That was, in terms of things that have, are spaces ever lost. My next question was going to be on the, what role and responsibility is there in places, especially like government institutions, especially for the people of New South Wales. Hello, these are the people of New South Wales. Probably most of you, I don't know. But what do you see as a role or responsibility? What can libraries, a place like the State Library of New South Wales, collecting institutes, what can we do for community? What can we do to uphold? What responsibility do we have to preserve this history and make it available?
I think you need to collect for more queer events, because just from, again, talking backstage, talking about, parties and events that happened in the 90s, or even like when I first came to Sydney, a lot of them are not around anymore. And that part of queer history, it really is lost if there isn't a concerted effort to actually archive and to reach out to people and try and somehow document that. Because I know so many younger people have absolutely no idea of where nightlife came from, a lot of the references that they use now, and even the way queer performance is in Sydney, they don't really know kind of the history of how that came to be, and because queer history isn't really documented enough.
And I suppose that's also a point of awareness, because we do hold a lot of collections here from, the last many decades, especially in Sydney, some organisations, some parties, we have manuscripts and records. I suppose that's also an awareness raising to our community that we do hold those things here, and we will continue to collect them. It is a resource if people wish to deposit their records here.
Are the collections ever showcased outside of the library? Like, I was thinking about what Jamaica was saying about, Western Sydney and what can be accessed there. Can the collections tour so that kind of queer archive and queer history leaves the centre of Sydney and goes out to regional libraries or Western Sydney libraries so that they can reach those queers who aren't necessarily getting a train to Martin Place?
Yeah, absolutely, they should. Like, there's the capacity for that to happen. I suppose, like, there is that's something that the library does either, you know, internally, but I suppose that's project-based, but we do lend our material for all various reasons to different exhibitions and things. There is that, the mechanisms are in place for that to happen.
Do it.
I suppose also it's those partnerships, it's that awareness. I feel like, I mean, as I said, when I first started working here, I didn't even know that actually I could just, as just a member of the public of New South Wales, I could just come in and request things to see. You can come into, anyone can come into the Mitchell Library, come to the Special Collections area and see original materials. So awareness of that, knowing that your history is here. It is also, you know, in many other places, not saying that this is the only place that it's held. There's the Queer Archives in Melbourne, there's, you know, people's personal collections and oral histories, like at the Pride History Group. But you can come in and see these things, and you're welcome to. And if we know about that, then maybe we look for opportunities for touring exhibitions, we look for partnerships, or we look for other community groups further and abroad outside of this bubble to see what we can do.
I think it would take, like, for communities, because there's so many diverse communities, right? For example, my community to feel welcome in here is to see them here. You know, this is a really great space for all of us representing our own places. This is like the first step. And then also like the tour thing, like actually doing that. A Western Sydney community member would be like, at the State Library putting in this effort to my little town, I feel trusted, you know, because I'm reading, well, there's too many papers to read, there's too many rules, too many laws, that just saying like, yeah, you can do it, you can find it in the back. It's like, I don't, like, I have no interest in that. But if my community is here seeing like these things happen, to be like, actually, yeah, it's actually coming to Cooper PD, you know, off the top of my head, like that stuff is really cool to me. Yeah, I love it. I think the state mindset to a real local mindset is really nice. I think there's a lot of like small town people I'm seeing, like a lot of nods. That's, yeah, everyone's like, yeah, me. Yeah, that's the thing. You got to see it to believe it, really. You can't see the change, so you got to be the change. Yeah. That's
But I think what you say about from a kind of state, I think you said state mindset to a local mindset, but I think that applies to the queer community more broadly, like acceptance and the change of kind of law reform and kind of acceptance into the mainstream has afforded us access into certain kinds of spaces and halls of power. But do we, I mean, when we talk about what we might have lost, do we then lose a real community, grassroots kind of localised mindset? Are we kind of, you know, I'm not allowed to slam Mardi Gras on this stage. No, but like what is lost? And it's fine. It's not the Mardi Gras that I went to when I was 5 with my like lesbian mums. And that's actually okay. It doesn't have to be for me anymore. But it is much more mainstream and corporate now than it was, for better or worse. And for some people, that's something to celebrate, and for some it's not. And I think that we can talk about that with all of our spaces and all of our initiatives, that as they evolve, what Joy was saying about all those individual people needing different things, they will evolve to serve different pockets of the audience. Sorry, that was a ramble. No. But yeah.
Well, and then I suppose branching out to beyond just the State Library, you know, so third spaces, you know, the first, you know, a place that's not home or work for people and community together. I feel like they're increasingly, it's always been a very important queer space, increasingly so potentially in the climate these days and how things are. Libraries are a really critical part of that. There's a lot of, you know, queer and trans kids and divergent kids, alternative kids that, are, you know, myself included, that found a safe space in my local library. And I feel like that's probably a common story for a lot of us. And if we're talking of that from state down to local level, like I'm sure we all have stories of how those are important and should be, you know, those spaces need to be continued. Like Jamaica, when we had a bit of a chat the other day, you mentioned a story about very close to your heart about Liverpool. Was it Liverpool Library for
Yes,
Do you mind sharing that story with us?
Of course. So I started this life as an actor. I was on like Disney and Nickelodeon when I was little, but then I ended up, that's only a plug for context. Then I became a hip hop dancer, a part of a collective called The Pioneers, and it was literally me copy and pasted 20 times. Like all of these queer people of color from the islands, we all got together and we had Street University, which was a space that was open to us, that we would be in and we would train and that would be our space, but it would close at 7 and we were kids that wanted to be up and about. So we would walk down to Liverpool Library just in the front foyer from 2010 to 2015. And for 5 years, every Tuesday and Friday after 7, we would walk from Street Uni down to that public space. And that was our haven. The Liverpool community realized, oh, these kids actually need this space. You know, it's not just they're not doing it for any reason. They're not being rowdy. You know, we weren't drinking. We weren't disrespecting the space. But because of the kind nature of the library, it harnessed the space for us that literally we would train at Liverpool Library, pack our bags, and Street University would fly us to Las Vegas to represent in Team Australia. And we were these global dancers, but the root of us was street, you know, and even though we did get some funding, like I remember Virgin Australia were funding us, all of this, we still didn't want to go in the studios because we grew up on the streets, you know. If you aren't from that experience, you wouldn't really get it. But all I can say is, like, I'm from a very small town in New Zealand, that anything small and simple is very attractive to me. It's quite like, feels like home to me, more like this life, this, you know, CBD, glamorous thing. This is one part, one facet of me, but the more that it comes more intimate and stuff, that's what feels fulfilling. Anyway, that's my ramble. Gosh, we all love a ramble, don't we?
Oh.
See, I sat up even. I was really giving it to you.
Thank you. I love that. So I suppose I've got 2 final questions and I'm trying to toss up between them. Let's throw in one slight related, but I'll try not to ramble myself too much in asking the question. Here's a new thing. So do you have thoughts, ideas on how we can create and maintain sustainable spaces that are inclusive, diverse and intersectional across our community for the future? And sustainable doesn't need to mean, you know, forever, as we discussed before. That's not, you know, things come and go. But any thoughts on inclusivity and recognition of that we're not all the same, that we have different backgrounds with different people? I lied about the rambling, I lied.
Oh gosh, all I can think of with this is that we're also different, and the through line between all of us is like intergenerational connection through community, and I honestly think that is the only thing that will be forever with everything, regardless of spaces, regardless of events or anything. It's just that community care. I have firsthand have felt this between this panel, and I just want to say briefly that, Graeme, I know of your place, definitely. We haven't personally formed a connection, but I know how pivotal that space is. The first place that ever gave me a rap performance opportunity was in Joy's space at the TID. And then the first person to really give me grace for a booking was that I was booked for Maeve's event, and then my brother passed away, and you actually paid me the fee instantly so that I could fly to my brother. I'm saying these things that regardless of what we represent, what spaces we represent, those aren't the memories that I'm remembering. It's community care. It's those people that really had my back when I didn't really think or could see it for me. And then now when these spaces are given up, I feel like I have a torch to really carry on a legacy that these people have carried on for me. And that's the only thing that's forever. Absolutely. Even backstage, I was listening to everybody. I'm so in awe of you all. You know, I'm a soaker inner, if that makes sense. But I love soaking in knowledge. I love soaking in these things because I know what grief is like to lose people. And one day I might not have this seat with these people. So while I'm here, I'm going to take it, you know. And then when I'm that generation for the next, I hope that they give that to me. But yeah, that's what I'm going to say is that we're beyond these bodies, you know, we're soul connectors. And even that, these physical realms, that's not forever, babe. But a memory in itself, when we meet each other in another life, in a different body, we'll definitely be queers still. But in that life, I hope we retouch base, and that's all I'll say, yeah.
Thank you.
I think queer spaces are sort of linked to the very notion of queer community. And I think if we want it to sustain and still have value in a context where we are being increasingly, or where many of us are being increasingly accepted by the mainstream, acknowledged not all, we have to stand in solidarity with other communities that are marginalised and other movements for justice. That's First Nations activism, that's activism for Palestine, that's activism against police violence. Like, we can't sit in increasing comfort and then expect to still be able to carve out spaces that are unique or valued for that kind of queerness or weirdness. And so, yeah, I think continuing to make our spaces political, continuing to treat each other with kind of care and respect in this global hellscape is all we can possibly do in order to be able to sleep at night.
Yes.
I just think so much is needed, really. You know, there really is. You know, it's not just funding, it's not just people showing up, and also solidarity, you know, with marginalised groups. I don't really have an answer. All I know is that there is a lot of things that are needed, and it requires the whole community to come together to meet all of those needs. So it's not just, you know, younger Gen Z people. It is, you know, people who work in more corporate fields, people in DIY. Everyone, the community needs to band together so that we can have the option and choices that we all say we want, but we actually have to, I guess, do the thing.
Show up at the venue.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is that I think there's a little bit of a renaissance around Taylor Square at the moment because we now have the Qtopia, the Queer Museum there, but also the outdoor seating at the bars, the Courthouse, the Kinsellas, the Oxford. It has brought a new life and a new energy to that area. It's probably predominantly gay men and maybe older gay men, but it's kind of something.
That's nice, though. I don't think all spaces don't have to be for all of us all the time. I think a beautiful space where, like, older gay men can chill together is fantastic. Like, I think it's okay also for us to come together again when we're, like, trying to create change, and then to sometimes hang out in a sub-department, I think is fine. I think that's okay.
I actually, when I was developing this question, I already was disagreeing with my own phrasing as I was writing it. Because I was thinking, well, maybe it's not a question of this, you know, unrealistic rainbow, everyone's the same, we have spaces that everybody is fit for everybody. Maybe we just are aware of each other at a certain point. We know that some spaces are going to be custom better for parts of community, for, you know, trans and gender diverse people, for people of colour, for people from other parts of Sydney and New South Wales, for different cultural backgrounds. And maybe we don't need to aim for us all to be in one space, all getting along, a happy families, because we're not all the same. No. And we don't all have the same needs, but maybe what we do there is an awareness of each other's spaces, supporting them in how we can, promoting them. Maybe that's a kind of, in similar way, that care, that ancestry, that thread through, because we get put under this LGBTQIA plus rainbow, but every single one of those letters, plus all the others, plus every individual person, we're all different. We all have different needs, and that doesn't mean that if we can't have a space that matches all of them, that we can't have a space.
I think it's about making sure that the spaces are safe for all of them.
Absolutely.
Like that if you turned up, you wouldn't be treated poorly or ostracised, of course. But yeah, it doesn't have to cater to everyone's needs.
I had other questions, but they're kind of similar. So I think that's a good point to kind of wrap up for this evening. I suppose I wanted to just end on a little bit of awareness. Like you're talking about, well, what does the library have and what can we do? I mean, many of you will have seen the collection display as you walk through. After we finish here, please feel free to have a look through a little more, talk with our curators, look at some material, ask questions. I've got a quote from one of the love letters to the Dyke Bar from the Bearded Tit Archive. I read through all of them. They're incredible. I cried a lot. I laughed a lot too. But there was a quote that it was, what is this place for you? Writing a love letter. And someone wrote, a safe place, a place to be me. We will still exist beyond these walls, but where and how? And I feel like these kind of conversations we've been having tonight, these ideas, all of the events, venues, what the people here have run and will continue to do, whatever in the future, that is where we will exist and how. We can keep this conversation going. We can make each other aware. We can ask these questions within our bubbles of community, within our peer groups. And so in that way, we can make sure our spaces aren't lost. They transform, they continue. We keep asking for more, we keep working. We keep standing up for the more marginalised in our communities. And then our stories can be preserved in our physical evidence as well, here in private archives, in other collections. Back to my feeling, two main points that I learned very early on working here is one, that we do have a lot of queer material in the collection. Like, I have been working through a lot of it on just for any project I can find, or any research interest, or finding things for people in the reading rooms. Not just books, manuscripts and archival records and photographs, historical and current, oral histories, artworks, scrapbooks, diaries, letters, zines. And the stated purpose of this library is for all people in New South Wales. And that's everyone here, that's us. The library's collection belongs to the people of New South Wales. That's like, I took a quote for that. It's written into our strategic document thing at the moment. Sorry, I'm very about policy. And so I think that's just the message I want to share. The libraries are as a place we can spend time, we can take up space, we can choose to meet, we can use their resources. And I think that's important to remember. So please feel free to have a look through that collection material. That's only the smallest sample of things here. You can contact us with ideas, or if you'd like to donate to the collection, or you think there's some gaps. And I'll leave you with one more quote from the Bearded Tit letters. I might be obsessed with them a little bit. Bearded Tit, I will miss you, but I'm also excited to see what kind of beautiful gathering of queers comes after you. And thank you everyone for joining us.